some of you a little bit earlier, and many of you are business owners. Am I right in the middle of it? Okay, let's see how we can do that. All right, we'll figure it out. So some of you who are business owners know that's a really big leap of faith. And everybody says, what are you, crazy doing this in the worst recession we've had in our lifetime? But I had a couple things going for me. One, I knew how to grow businesses. I've made a lot of people very wealthy over the years. I love to do sales. I made my first sale when I was 8 years old. I had a little verbal population problem, and I walked into a pet store and waited in line, and the store manager gave me 50 cents a journal. In 1972, when you're 8 years old, 50 cents was a week's worth of allowance. So in 10 minutes, I had made 8 weeks worth of revenue for myself, and I didn't have to do a single chore. But the other thing I knew I had going for myself is I'm really passionate about helping people succeed. When my clients succeed, I feel like I just had a real win. So I've been very blessed, very fortunate. What we do is we do help some people with some marketing services, lead generation. Our real sweet spot, though, is what Jeff said, when those leads come in, conversions. Because we can bring in all the leads in the world, but if we can't turn them into paying clients, we're really spinning our wheels. Wouldn't you agree? Okay, so we're going to have to wake this group up. Coffee's in the back. Does anybody ever feel like they're working with a prospect, and at the end of it, if they don't close the sale, anybody closing 100% of the prospects they work with? No. If you are, you just haven't done it long enough. You've had one, maybe. So do you ever walk away kind of scratching your head saying, I wonder what I could have done better? Or feel like you've left some business on the table? Anybody ever feel that way?
Sure.
I mean, I have. So what we're going to look at are some really good tips for you to help prevent that from happening. So help me get an idea. How many of you in this room are in some way, shape, or form involved with your sales process? Either you're doing sales, okay, most of the room. Terrific. I just want to make sure that we're focused here and hitting the right target. So excuse me, I do have to step in front of it. So today what we're going to talk about, if you're looking for better results, if you feel like you're leaving that business on the table, if you even feel like you're doing a great job and just want a few fresh tips, you'll walk away with something, I promise. I work with companies that have solo entrepreneurs. They're the people doing the outreach, right on up to companies that have a sales force of 100 people. Right on into franchise organizations where they can have literally thousands of people out there selling. And the information that I give, I get some really great feedback on. So what I want to start with is just talking a little bit about why teams are struggling today. And once we understand that, I think it really sets the stage for what we need to do to be successful in sales. So when I walk into clients and I talk to the sales team, I'm going to back myself up here. How many of you started in sales in the last 5 years? A couple of you. Okay. How many has it been, like 5 to 15 years? Okay. And how many of you over 15 years? Okay. Believe it or not, it can be tougher for some of us who have been in sales over 15 years to adapt to today's environment than it is for somebody who's only been doing it for 5 years. Why is that? Anybody? I saw head nod.
Just the way people get information.
Exactly. Exactly. It's the way we process. So we all walked into this room with a bag of expectations, preconceptions, experience, skills. So if I start telling you something that sounds like it's way out there, what are you going to do? Shut it off. And that's what happens to us as adults when we learn. So when I walk into a team, I'll introduce you via slide to one of my clients, Kai. He's a web designer. His entire team, they're all in their 20s, early 20s, mid-20s. They've never had sales experience or sales training. So when you walk in and show it to them, they don't know any better. So they just head right out and do it. When we talk to people who've been around a little bit longer, it's hard because you might have tried something like it in the past, or it's really different from things that you've tried before. So what I'm going to ask you to do is open up your minds, just be open to the thoughts that I'm going to share with you, and hopefully you'll find 2 or 3 or 10 ideas that you can use. The second thing that will make you successful is taking action. So what I'd love to ask you to do is, as I go through this, take a few notes and write down 1 or 2 or 3 tips and make a promise to yourself that you are going to take action on those tips today. When you go back to your offices, you work with your prospects, try them out. I promise you, you will have great results. So what we're seeing today, of course, is the economy, right? I walk into a company and the sales, okay, that's a fine over in the box. I walk into companies and the sales team says to me, well, Fiona, don't you know it's the economy? Flat is the new normal. I know it can't be me because I've talked to all of my competitors and they aren't doing very well either. Anybody ever say one of those things or think one of those things? Of course you have. Well, the economy, of course, is impacting the way we do business, but that's not all of it. There's been a confluence of events over the last, really, decade or more that has put us in a very tricky situation when it comes to sales. And where companies have done an excellent job adapting their marketing, using what Charlie suggested, using video and reaching out through social media. Who was the social media expert I talked to earlier in here? Someone was doing social media. There you go, Steve, right? Yeah, did well processing those names. But our sales teams are still doing business the way we did them 20 years ago. And it just doesn't work the same way anymore. The other thing that has changed is our customers. There's this wealth of information out there on that thing called the internet. How many of you have made a big purchase in the last 2 or 3 years without first doing a little bit of research online? Anybody? No, we all go there. So that makes us experts. We've got a much more educated consumer base. And if you don't believe that, I'm sure you've had customers call you or prospects call you, and they know more about your business than you do, or at least they think they do. And that makes it a little bit of a challenge when we are selling to these folks. Because again, if somebody's coming in with a preconceived idea and you tell them something totally different, what are they going to do? Click you right off. We're also seeing sales processes extend. If your sales cycle was maybe 3 months before, it's taking 6 months. If it was 6 months, it could be taking a year. If it was a year, it could be taking longer. Some of the clients I work with in senior living, for example, that's like a 2-year sales cycle from the time people first come to them to the time they actually move in. The other problem that we have is that as business owners, we have been conditioning buyers for the last decade or 2 decades to get a discount. Think about it. When was the last time anybody walked into Macy's and paid full price for something? I can't remember. And they started with their one-day sales 20 years ago, and they did them twice a year, 3 times a year, and it was, wow, this is fantastic. It was so good they started doing it every 3 weeks. So what we've done is program people into thinking, why would I pay full price when I can get it on sale? And if I really need something in between, I'll go to Marshall's or TJ Maxx. Well, we do the same thing in the business world. Incentives work. We know they work. But because they work, we have actually reconditioned the buyers so that that's how they are making their decisions. And when you take all of that and combine it with a need for new skills, that's why you end up getting fewer conversions. So what people tell me they see are prospects who are not engaged. Ever have that you just can't really get them to interact with you, tell them what they're thinking, call you back, they're just not engaging. Or they're engaging, they kind of get pretty far down the line with you and they change their mind. Or their boss comes in and says, no, we're going to go in a different direction, that's not in the budget. Or if you're in a B2C industry, their spouse comes in and says, honey, what are you, crazy? We're not doing that. Right? You can't, you've got to think about these folks when you're doing business with them, and we'll talk a little bit about how to do it. We are seeing sticker shock. That's been around forever. My favorite, which is what I call submarine syndrome. Anybody ever had this happen? You're working with a prospect, they seem really interested, and you're moving along, and all of a sudden you're coming up to signing day if you have an agreement that needs to be signed, and then all of a sudden they just go under. They don't call you back, they don't return your emails, they don't respond to texts. You do a Google search to see if they're still alive. Okay? Believe it or not, I can't eliminate all these things. If I could, I would be retired right now. But I can definitely help you reduce them and increase the number of referrals that you're getting. So what I'm giving to you today is the stuff that I give to my clients. And where I want to start with is, to me, what is the most important part of sales. When I look at sales teams, there's always that 10-15% of the sales force at the very top. And even more so, there's a 5%, and the difference between the 60%, the majority in the middle, and that 15% is usually fairly substantial. And again, between that 10% and the 5% at the top. These are the peak performers. And when you take a look at what's going on between the ears and behind the eyes of peak performers, you start to think maybe these folks know something that the rest of us don't. You think they might have something worth sharing? Anybody? Mm-hmm. I've made a career out of looking at these individuals. And really, we actually do courses. What you're getting today comes out of our Transformational Sales Academy. We actually have courses on how peak performers think and behave and excel. But three of the core things they have, I call them the 3 C's of success, right? They have confidence, credibility, and caring. Now the gentleman up there, Suburbs, you may not know his name, but you're probably familiar with his work. Anybody ever read Peter Pan when you were a kid? Or see the movie? So he said, the moment you doubt whether you can fly, you cease to ever be able to do it. Now I don't have pixie dust for you. But what he's saying is right. You need to have a confidence, not just in yourself, but in your product or service. Because if you don't feel that what you are selling or offering is the best of its kind or the best value in your space, you're going to have a really hard time convincing somebody else. If you don't believe it, why would anybody believe you? The next part of that, you've all heard of Dale Carnegie, right? Okay? He said people do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. Well, in sales, we're usually pretty gregarious and friendly, so we can get to know people and they might like us. But credibility you have to work a little bit harder for. If you lose your trust with a prospect, they will immediately look for somebody else where they can find it. So building that credibility, which is really just doing what you say you're going to do, keeping your promises, and most importantly, if you can't deliver 100% of the time on a service, do not advertise it. Don't promote it. Promote what you can do 100% of the time. And then give that 70, 80, 90% as an added value. It's a bonus. And when you have your operational side of the business where you can do that 100% of the time, then you can start to promote it. To do otherwise, you're going to pull the rug right out from underneath your credibility, every time. Excuse me. I'm trying to not stand in front of this and not trip over the cords. If I end up flat, yeah. Thank you. I'm good. I'm good, really. The final piece comes from Teddy Roosevelt. Roosevelt said, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you can. And this is the piece that I don't see in sales probably 80% of the time. I get calls from people all the time who are trying to sell stuff to me. And they haven't asked a single question about what my needs are, about what I'm looking for. It's, you know, let's take whatever we have the most of in our inventory and move that out. Right? We'll put it on sale, push that. Or let's take the service that we get the best markup on. The problem with that kind of selling is it doesn't work anymore today. Because people know if they can't get from you what they want, they'll just go right down the street. And that customer loyalty that we used to be able to build when we were dealing in a more localized area, that works right up until somebody stops caring. When you can take your focus and turn it around so that your top concern, when I deal with a prospect, I sit down with them, I have a quiet place where I'm talking to them, I'm looking right at them. Okay, I'm going to pick on Bob, who's right in front of me. That's it. That's my world. For that entire time, everything, all of my stuff goes somewhere else. And all I'm doing is listening and asking questions. Because I can't help Bob or anybody else until I have a really good understanding of what's going on and what's going to help. And if you can do those 3 things, all the rest are just going to fall right into place. The 10 tips that I'm giving you. But this is important because if you don't start, if you don't come from this place, it's really, really tough to be successful. You can fake it for a while. You'll feel terrible at the end of the day. If you're selling something you don't believe in, if you're not, really respecting and caring about your prospects. But if you can do these 3 things, success, that's at 50% of it, right there. Just a little taste. So I just want to introduce you to Kai. I'm doing this for 2 reasons. First of all, Kai is one of my clients. This is the gentleman I talked to you about. He designs websites, and you're going to see one of the sites, hopefully, that he designed for me, which is our online training that we've offered people. And I went in and trained his team. Like I said, these are young guys. They're all in their 20s. They picked it up. In 3 weeks, he implemented 2 of the suggestions I'm going to give you today, and he closed 7 sales. And he told me he would not have, he maybe would have closed 1 of them, but he attributed them to what we've learned. We've since talked, and I've been in several times to work with his team, and he's told me he's increased his business by 30% since we started working together. So I do this to show those of you who are like me, coming in with a bag of tricks and a bag of skills. It works. It really works. If you can kind of approach it with that, I'm going to empty my mind and just try it. You'll see amazing, amazing results. So tip number 1. Who in here has a clearly defined sales process? I know one person does at least. A process where if you've got 2 or 3 or 4 people selling for you, they're each doing the same steps in order with your prospects at the same time. Anybody doing that? No, a couple? Okay. Here's why it's important. Now, if you're, do we have any finance folks in the room? Anybody in the finance industry? Okay, finance industry, you have got maybe 136 steps, right? From A to, from lead to close. If you can somehow break them into somewhere between 3 to 5 broad steps that you can easily articulate and easily explain to your prospects, it does a couple things. First of all, we'll talk about down the line, you're going to explain it to them. So it lets you hold them to their timelines. Because in order for them to get what they want by the time they need it, we need to go from 1 to 2 to 3. But more importantly, it helps you. Because if you take these broad steps, this was Kai's sales process. And we didn't really change the sales process. We defined it a little bit, and then we shifted some things around. So he finds his leads, qualifies them, identifies issues, presents a proposal, gets the contract signed, gets a new client. That hasn't changed, but some of those sub-steps we put in a different order. And all of a sudden, this tiny little tweak that didn't cost him any money or any time, in fact, it saved him time and money, made this huge, huge difference. I'm going to show you what that was as we move along. Everything else that I'm going to show you is going to happen within that sales process, but it's really key and critical to do that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes?
What's the difference between that and the funnel system?
Probably that you could show it either way. A sales funnel, which is what you sometimes see, where people are coming in and they're moving down. And actually, a funnel is pretty good because what happens is up here you're going to get a lot of leads, a lot of people coming in. A lead's not a prospect, right? Everybody in this room is a lead for each other, for me. But you're not a prospect until we qualify each other, right? I might be looking to see if, or you might be looking to see if that prospect or that lead has a certain financial ability to pay, they need your stuff, they want to buy your stuff. There's things that we go through to qualify as prospects. So you're starting to narrow it down as you start to identify issues and talk to the person. and the whole time you're going to get fallout. Most of your fallout should come up here. And if you're doing that, you're going to be spending most of your time with the folks who really are interested and want to buy and will buy. And we're going to cover that a little bit as we go. So I mentioned sometimes that somebody's boss comes in and sings the deal, or their wife or husband comes in and sings the deal. The main reason is they're not involved in the process. I used to work with a big company. We awarded franchises to people. Anybody a franchise owner? No? Franchising is kind of its own little world, and you're making this huge investment, which makes you a customer, but the company that you're going to is screening to make sure that you're going to be successful and meet the qualifications. And a lot of times people will get laid off, top level managers, mid-level managers. They can see they've got this chunk of money. They know if they don't get a job, it's going to go away. So they come in and they talk to you about a franchise.